The morning sun cast long shadows across the courtyard of Buckingham Palace as guard Thomas Mitchell adjusted his red tunic for what felt like the 1,000th time. His black bearskin hat sat perfectly positioned, and his polished boots reflected the early light. For 3 years, he had stood at his post with unwavering discipline, following the strict protocol that defined his role as one of Her Majesty's guards. Thomas had always prided himself on maintaining the stoic composure expected of the Queen's Guard. Never flinch, never smile, never break character. These were the unwritten rules that governed his every movement during duty hours. Tourists would try everything to make him react. Silly faces, inappropriate jokes, even attempts to touch his uniform. But Thomas remained as still as the stone statues that adorned the palace walls. On this particular Tuesday morning, something different was about to happen that would change not only Thomas's perspective, but also touch the hearts of millions around the world. As the changing of the guard ceremony concluded, Thomas took his position at the main entrance. The usual crowd of tourists gathered, cameras ready to capture the iconic image of the motionless sentinel. Among them stood a small family, a mother, father, and their 7-year-old daughter, Emma. Emma was unlike the other children who visited the palace. She moved slowly, supported by special leg braces that helped her walk. Her parents, Sarah and David Chen, had saved for years to bring their daughter to London. Emma had been born with spina bifida, a condition that affected her mobility, but it had never dampened her spirit or curiosity about the world. The little girl's eyes sparkled with wonder as she gazed up at Thomas. She had read every book about the royal guards in her school library back in Australia. To her, these guards were real-life superheroes, protecting the Queen with their unwavering dedication. "Mummy, why doesn't he move?" Emma whispered, tugging at her mother's sleeve. Sarah knelt down beside her daughter. "The guards have a very important job, sweetheart. They protect the Queen, and they must stay very still and alert." Emma nodded seriously, understanding the gravity of such responsibility. She watched Thomas with the kind of intense focus that only children possess. For 20 minutes, she stood there, occasionally shifting her weight from one leg to the other as her braces caused discomfort, but never taking her eyes off the guard. Thomas, trained to remain focused on his duties, found himself acutely aware of the little girl's presence. Through his peripheral vision, he could see her struggle to stand for long periods. He noticed how she would lean against her father when the pain became too much, but how she always straightened up again, determined to keep watching. What Thomas didn't know was that Emma had been in and out of hospitals for most of her young life. She had endured multiple surgeries, countless hours of physical therapy, and the daily challenge of navigating a world not designed for children with disabilities. Yet here she was, standing as still and determined as any guard, showing the same kind of discipline and courage that Thomas had trained years to develop. As the crowd began to thin, Emma's parents gently suggested it was time to move on to see other parts of the palace, but Emma shook her head, her small hand gripping her father's tightly. "Just a few more minutes, please," she pleaded. "I want to show the guard that I can stand still, too." David looked at his wife, both parents recognizing their daughter's determination. They had seen this look before, during her therapy sessions, before her surgeries, whenever Emma set her mind to proving that her disability wouldn't define her limitations. Thomas continued his duty, but something stirred within him. The protocols he had memorized so carefully seemed to fade into the background as he became more aware of the child's quiet struggle and determination. He had witnessed countless interactions during his time on duty, but this felt different. As another 30 minutes passed, Emma began to sway slightly. The effort of standing for so long was taking its toll, but she refused to sit down or leave. Her parents offered to carry her, but she politely declined, whispering that she wanted to be brave like the guard. It was then that Thomas made a decision that would go against everything he had been trained to do. Very slowly, almost imperceptibly to anyone not watching closely, Thomas shifted his weight slightly and moved his eyes to look directly at Emma. For just a moment, their eyes met. Then, with the subtlest of movements, Thomas gave her the smallest nod of acknowledgement. Emma's face lit up with a smile so bright it could have powered the entire palace. She had been seen. She had been acknowledged by one of the Queen's own guards. In that moment, she felt like the bravest person in the world. But Thomas wasn't finished. As Emma's parents finally convinced her it was time to leave, promising they would return the next day, Thomas did something unprecedented. He waited until the area was relatively clear of tourists and officials, then performed a move that was both against protocol and absolutely perfect. As Emma slowly made her way past his post, Thomas brought his hand up in a crisp, military salute, not to a passing officer or dignitary, but to a 7-year-old girl with leg braces who had shown more courage and determination than many adults he had encountered. Emma stopped in her tracks, her mouth falling open in amazement. Her parents, equally stunned, watched as their daughter attempted to return the salute, her small hand trembling with emotion and effort. "Thank you, sir," Emma said in her clearest voice, her Australian accent making the words even more endearing. For a brief moment, Thomas allowed a small smile to cross his lips before returning to his stoic position. Emma continued on her way, walking a little taller despite her braces, her heart full of pride and joy. Unknown to any of them, this exchange had been witnessed by several tourists who had captured the moment on their cameras and phones. But more importantly, it had been seen by Lieutenant Colonel James Harrison, the officer responsible for the guard's conduct. Instead of reprimanding Thomas for breaking protocol, Harrison found himself deeply moved by what he had witnessed. He had served in the military for over 20 years and had seen bravery in many forms, but the mutual respect and recognition between the guard and the child represented something special, the human spirit transcending duty and protocol. That evening, as Thomas completed his shift, he found himself thinking about Emma's determination and courage. He had stood guard during state visits, royal weddings, and countless ceremonial events, but this simple interaction with a brave little girl had reminded him why his service truly mattered. The story of Emma and Thomas was just beginning. Word of their encounter began to spread, not through official channels, but through the hearts and social media accounts of those who had witnessed it. The image of a royal guard saluting a disabled child began to circulate, accompanied by stories of Emma's determination and Thomas's compassionate response. What none of them knew was that this moment would spark a series of events that would touch people around the world, challenge long-standing traditions, and prove that sometimes the most profound acts of respect happen not between dignitaries and royalty, but between a dedicated guard and a brave little girl who refused to let anything stop her from standing tall. The next morning brought unexpected developments to Buckingham Palace. Lieutenant Colonel Harrison had spent most of the night thinking about what he had witnessed between Guard Thomas Mitchell and young Emma Chen. As dawn broke over London, he made several phone calls that would set extraordinary events in motion. Emma woke up in her hotel room with excitement bubbling in her chest. She had dreamed about the guard's salute all night, replaying the moment over and over in her mind. Her parents had promised they would return to the palace, and Emma could hardly contain her eagerness to see if the same guard would be on duty. Meanwhile, social media had begun to work its magic. The photos and videos taken by tourists the previous day were spreading across platforms worldwide. The hashtag #BraveEmma started trending, with people sharing their own stories of courage in the face of adversity. The image of Thomas saluting Emma became a symbol of respect, dignity, and the power of human connection. Sarah Chen woke to her phone buzzing with notifications. Friends and family from Australia were sending her links to news articles and social media posts featuring her daughter. Major news outlets had picked up the story, with headlines reading, "Royal Guard breaks protocol for disabled child," and "A salute that touched the world." At the palace, Thomas reported for duty, unaware of the media attention his gesture had generated. Lieutenant Colonel Harrison approached him with an unusual expression, part seriousness, part admiration. "Mitchell," Harrison began, "we need to talk about yesterday's incident." Thomas straightened, expecting disciplinary action. "Yes, sir. I take full responsibility for breaking protocol." Harrison studied the young guard for a moment. "Tell me, in your own words, what happened." Thomas recounted the events, emphasizing Emma's remarkable determination and courage. He explained how her unwavering spirit had moved him to acknowledge her effort and bravery. "Sir, I understand if this results in disciplinary action," Thomas concluded, "but I would make the same decision again. That little girl showed more courage yesterday than many people show in a lifetime." Harrison nodded slowly. "Mitchell, you've served with distinction for 3 years. Your record is exemplary. But yesterday you did something more important than following protocol. You showed the heart of what our service truly means." Thomas looked confused as Harrison continued. "The palace has received hundreds of calls and emails overnight. The story of your interaction with Emma Chen has touched people worldwide. More importantly, it has reminded everyone why we serve, not just to protect buildings and follow rules, but to embody the values of honor, courage, and compassion." As they spoke, Emma and her parents were making their way back to the palace. Emma had insisted on wearing her best dress and had practiced her salute in the hotel mirror for over an hour. She carried with her a small drawing she had made the night before, a picture of herself and the guard, both standing tall and proud. The crowd outside the palace was larger than usual, with many people hoping to catch a glimpse of the now famous guard and the brave little girl. News crews had gathered, having heard about the viral story, but they maintained a respectful distance. When Emma arrived with her parents, she was surprised to see Lieutenant Colonel Harrison waiting for them at the gate. He introduced himself and asked if they would mind meeting with some palace officials. "Is Thomas in trouble?" Emma asked immediately, her voice full of concern. "It's my fault if he is. I just wanted to be brave like him." Harrison knelt down to Emma's eye level. "No, young lady, he's not in trouble. In fact, we'd like to honor both of you for showing everyone what true bravery looks like." Emma's eyes widened as Harrison explained that Her Majesty had personally heard about their story and had requested a special meeting. The Queen, known for her appreciation of courage and service, wanted to acknowledge both the guard's compassion and Emma's determination. As they were escorted into the palace grounds, Thomas was being briefed on the unprecedented situation. Never before had a guard's spontaneous act of kindness resulted in a royal audience, but these were extraordinary circumstances. The meeting took place in one of the palace's smaller, more intimate rooms. When Emma entered, supported by her parents but walking proudly on her own, Thomas was already standing at attention. The moment she saw him, her face broke into the same brilliant smile that had captivated him the day before. "You came back," Thomas said softly, momentarily forgetting protocol. "I promised I would," Emma replied, pulling out her drawing. "I made this for you." As Thomas looked at the picture, a colorful representation of their moment of mutual respect, Lieutenant Colonel Harrison cleared his throat. "Miss Chen, Guard Mitchell, it is my honor to inform you that Her Majesty will be joining us shortly. She has heard your story and wanted to personally acknowledge the courage you both displayed." Emma's parents exchanged amazed glances. They had brought their daughter to London, hoping to give her a memorable experience, never imagining it would lead to meeting the Queen herself. When Queen Elizabeth II entered the room, she carried herself with the graceful dignity for which she was renowned worldwide. But there was also warmth in her eyes as she looked at Emma, who was attempting to curtsy while managing her leg braces. "Please, my dear, there's no need for such formality," the Queen said gently. "I understand you've been showing my guards what true courage looks like." Emma looked up at the Queen with wonder. "Your Majesty, Thomas is the bravest person I've ever met. He stands so still and protects you every day. I just wanted to be brave like him." The Queen smiled, then turned to Thomas. "And Guard Mitchell, I understand you recognized exceptional courage when you saw it." "Yes, Your Majesty," Thomas replied. "Miss Chen demonstrated the kind of determination and spirit that exemplifies the best of what we serve to protect." What happened next surprised everyone in the room. The Queen asked Emma to show her the drawing she had made. As Emma carefully unfolded the paper, the Queen studied it with genuine interest. "This is quite remarkable, Emma," the Queen said. "You've captured something very special here. The moment when two brave people recognized each other's courage." The Queen then did something that would become another viral moment. She asked Thomas to step forward and, in front of Emma and her parents, personally thanked him for his service and his compassion. "Guard Mitchell," the Queen said formally, "your actions yesterday reminded us all that our greatest strength lies not in rigid adherence to protocol, but in our capacity for compassion and recognition of courage in all its forms." She then turned to Emma. "And Miss Chen, your determination and bravery have inspired people around the world. You have shown that courage comes in many forms, and yours is particularly admirable." The Queen had a special request. She asked if Emma would be willing to participate in a ceremony the following day, where she and Thomas would be formally recognized for their demonstration of mutual respect and courage. Emma's response was immediate and heartfelt. "Will Thomas be there too?" When assured that he would be, Emma nodded enthusiastically. "Then yes, Your Majesty. But can I ask for one thing?" The Queen, clearly charmed by the child's directness, nodded. "Can I stand next to Thomas during the ceremony? I want to show everyone that we're both brave together." The room fell silent for a moment. Then the Queen's face broke into a genuine smile. "My dear child, I can think of nothing more appropriate." As the meeting concluded, Thomas found himself walking alongside Emma as they left the room. She slipped her small hand into his much larger one, and for a moment, they were not a royal guard and a visitor, but simply two people who had recognized something special in each other. "Thank you for seeing me yesterday," Emma said quietly. "Thank you for showing me what real courage looks like," Thomas replied. The story of their meeting with the Queen quickly spread around the world, but for Emma and Thomas, the most important thing was the friendship that had formed between them. Emma's family extended their stay in London, and each day she would visit the palace, sometimes just to wave at Thomas during his duties. The ceremony planned for the following day would bring their story full circle, but more importantly, it would establish a new tradition at the palace, one that recognized that sometimes the most meaningful moments happen not in grand halls or formal events, but in simple acts of human kindness and mutual respect. As Emma fell asleep that night, still clutching the program from their meeting with the Queen, she dreamed not of fairy tales and crowns, but of standing tall beside her friend Thomas, proving to the world that courage comes in all sizes and forms. The morning of the ceremony dawned crisp and clear, with golden sunlight streaming across the palace grounds. Emma woke early, her excitement making sleep impossible. Today was not just about receiving recognition from the Queen. It was about standing beside Thomas and showing the world that friendship and courage could transcend any barrier. Sarah and David Chen helped their daughter prepare for what would undoubtedly be the most memorable day of her life. Emma had chosen to wear a navy blue dress with small embroidered flowers, paired with her most comfortable leg braces. She had practiced her speech dozens of times, though her parents assured her that simply being herself would be perfect. At the palace, Thomas was preparing for a ceremony unlike any he had ever participated in during his service. Lieutenant Colonel Harrison had briefed him on the proceedings, explaining that media from around the world would be present to document this unprecedented event. The palace has received over 10,000 letters and emails from people inspired by your story, Harrison informed Thomas. Children with disabilities, veterans, families facing challenges, they've all written to express how your gesture gave them hope and courage. Thomas felt the weight of responsibility, but also a profound sense of purpose. What had begun as a simple moment of recognition had grown into something much larger, a symbol of how small acts of kindness could ripple outward to touch countless lives. As guests began arriving for the ceremony, the palace courtyard filled with an unusual mix of attendees. Alongside dignitaries and officials stood families who had traveled from across the globe, many bringing children with various disabilities who had been inspired by Emma's story. Among them was Marcus Rodriguez, a 12-year-old from Spain who had been born without his left arm but had started boxing after seeing Emma's determination. There was Aisha Patel from India, a young girl with cerebral palsy who had written a poem about courage that her parents had submitted to the palace. Families from Japan, Brazil, Canada, and dozens of other countries had made the journey to witness this celebration of human resilience. When Emma arrived with her parents, she was amazed to see so many people gathered, but her attention immediately focused on finding Thomas among the assembled guards. When she spotted him standing in formation with his fellow guardsmen, she waved enthusiastically, causing a ripple of smiles among the crowd. The ceremony began with the Queen's arrival, but the format was deliberately informal to accommodate the young participants. Rather than the traditional rigid protocol, the event felt more like a community celebration of courage and kindness. Lieutenant Colonel Harrison served as the master of ceremonies, reading letters from people around the world who had been touched by Emma and Thomas's story. One letter from a military family in Australia read, "Our son has been struggling with the loss of his leg in an accident. Seeing Emma's determination and the guards' recognition of her courage has given our family hope and shown our son that heroes come in all forms." Another letter from a teacher in Canada stated, "Emma's story has transformed how our school addresses differences among students. We now have a courage recognition program where children acknowledge acts of bravery in their classmates, no matter how small." When it came time for the main presentation, the Queen stepped forward with 2 special medals that had been created specifically for this occasion. They were simple but elegant, a small crown above 2 hands clasped in friendship with the words "Courage and Compassion" inscribed below. "Guard Mitchell," the Queen began, "your willingness to see beyond protocol to acknowledge true bravery represents the finest qualities of service. Your gesture reminded us that our greatest duty is to recognize and honor courage wherever we find it." As Thomas stepped forward to receive his medal, the crowd erupted in applause. But the most meaningful reaction came from Emma, who clapped so enthusiastically that she nearly lost her balance, causing her parents to steady her with loving smiles. "Emma Chen," the Queen continued, "your determination, spirit, and unwavering courage in the face of challenges have inspired people across the globe. You have shown that bravery is not the absence of struggle, but the decision to keep standing tall despite it." As Emma approached the Queen to receive her medal, the crowd fell silent. The image of this small girl with leg braces walking confidently toward the monarch would become one of the most shared photographs in social media history. But the ceremony's most powerful moment was yet to come. After both medals had been presented, the Queen made an unexpected announcement. "Today we are not only honoring 2 individuals, but establishing a new tradition." The annual Courage Recognition Ceremony will take place here each year, acknowledging ordinary people who perform extraordinary acts of bravery, kindness, and determination. She paused, looking directly at Emma and Thomas. And I can think of no better way to inaugurate this tradition than to ask our first recipients to demonstrate the friendship and mutual respect that brought us all here today. Thomas stepped forward and, with perfect military precision, offered Emma his arm. Together, they walked to the center of the courtyard where, side by side, they stood as the crowd rose in a thunderous ovation. Emma, despite her fatigue from standing for so long, raised her hand in the salute she had practiced so many times. Thomas, breaking with protocol once again but now with official approval, returned her salute with equal respect and precision. The symbolism was lost on no one present. Here stood a royal guard and a little girl with disabilities, both wearing medals of courage, demonstrating that respect, friendship, and recognition of worth transcend all boundaries of age, position, and physical ability. As the formal ceremony concluded, something magical happened. The children who had come from around the world began approaching Emma and Thomas, sharing their own stories of courage and challenge. Marcus from Spain showed Emma how he had learned to box with one arm. Aisha from India recited her poem about finding strength in difference. Thomas found himself surrounded by children and their families, all eager to share how his simple gesture had impacted their lives. A father from Germany thanked him for showing his daughter, who used a wheelchair, that she deserved recognition for her daily acts of bravery. A mother from Brazil explained how Emma's story had motivated her son with autism to face his fears about starting a new school. Emma, meanwhile, had become the unofficial ambassador for courage. Despite her young age, she listened carefully to each child's story, offering encouragement and sharing her own experiences with surgeries, therapy, and the daily challenges of living with a disability. "The hardest part isn't the walking," she told a group of children. "It's when people look at you like you can't do things. But Thomas taught me that when someone really sees you, it makes all the difference." As the afternoon wore on, the formal ceremony gave way to an impromptu celebration of human resilience. Palace guards, many initially skeptical about the break in tradition, found themselves deeply moved by the stories they heard and the connections being formed. One veteran guard, Sergeant William Price, who had served for 15 years, approached Lieutenant Colonel Harrison with tears in his eyes. "Sir, in all my years of service, I've never felt more proud of what our uniform represents than I do today." The day's events were broadcast live around the world, but beyond the media coverage, something profound had shifted. The palace had become not just a symbol of tradition and protocol, but a place where human dignity and courage were celebrated in all their forms. As evening approached and the ceremony officially concluded, Emma and Thomas found themselves sitting together on a palace bench, their medals catching the fading sunlight. Emma's parents watched from a respectful distance as their daughter and her unlikely friend shared quiet conversation. "Will I see you again?" Emma asked, her voice carrying the uncertainty of a child who had experienced loss and disappointment. Thomas smiled, his usual formal demeanor completely relaxed. "Emma, you've changed how I see my role here. I have a feeling our friendship is just beginning." True to his word, Thomas maintained contact with Emma and her family long after they returned to Australia. He sent letters describing his duties and the changes happening at the palace. Emma responded with drawings, school achievements, and updates on her medical progress. More importantly, their story continued to inspire others. The annual Courage Recognition Ceremony became one of the most anticipated events on the royal calendar, drawing nominations from around the world of ordinary people performing extraordinary acts of kindness and bravery. 5 years later, Emma returned to London for the ceremony's anniversary. Now 12 and walking more confidently with improved braces, she served as a junior ambassador, helping to present awards to a new generation of courage recipients. Thomas, now promoted to sergeant and serving as coordinator for the ceremony, watched with pride as Emma addressed the crowd. Her speech was simple but profound. Courage isn't about being perfect or strong all the time. It's about being kind, standing up for others, and never giving up on yourself. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is just keep going, one step at a time. The story of Emma Chen and Thomas Mitchell had evolved from a single moment of recognition into a movement that celebrated the inherent dignity and potential in every person. Their friendship had proven that genuine human connection could transcend any barrier, and that sometimes the most important protocols are those written not in manuals, but in the heart. As the anniversary ceremony concluded, Emma and Thomas walked together through the palace gardens, their friendship having grown deeper over the years. They had both learned that true courage lies not in grand gestures or perfect performances, but in the willingness to see and acknowledge the best in one another. Their story continues to inspire people worldwide, reminding everyone that sometimes the most profound acts of respect happen not between the powerful and the famous, but between two people who recognize something special in each other's spirit. In a world often divided by differences, Emma and Thomas had shown that courage, kindness, and friendship remain the most powerful forces for bringing people together.